Welcome to session number 4 in the EAIE Community Summit series. I'm Laura Rumbley, Associate Director for Knowledge Development and Research at the European Association for International Education. I have the great pleasure at this time to lead us into our final session in this first ever EAIE Community Summit. Our discussion today will be focused on the subject of finding balance and resilience on shifting ground, I think an aspiration that we can all relate to. And we have the very immense honor to be guided in this discussion by Michael Ignatieff, President and Rector of the Central European University. An historian by training, Dr. Ignatieff is a former member of Parliament in Canada, where he served as leader of the Liberal Party. Prior to his appointment at the helm of CEU, he held numerous academic posts, including the Edward R. Murrow Chair of Press, Politics, and Public Policy at Harvard University's John F. Kennedy School of Government. Dr. Ignatieff is, of course, well known to the EAIE community by virtue of his leadership role at CEU, during which time he's been responsible for guiding that institution through very complex political waters. For this work, he was awarded the EAIE's own Constance Meldrum Award for Vision and Leadership in 2018. Thank you so much for being with us today from Hungary, Dr. Ignatieff.
Delighted to be here. Thanks so much for having me on. I'm amazed. We got people from Argentina, India, Florida, Newcastle, Sweden. Welcome to you all.
It is really a pleasure to see the scope of this community, and they're very excited to be with us, I'm sure. I know you have a lot to say about matters of institutional and personal resilience, but before we turn to those perspectives that you have, I thought it would be interesting and important for us to engage in an audience-focused exercise that gives us a sense of what our community is really thinking about resilience at their own institutions. So in order to do this, I'd like to direct everybody's attention to a poll that you should be seeing on the screen that asks you to consider a question from the perspective of your own institution. If resilience is defined as the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties, how would you rate the resilience of your institution's internationalization agenda and activities in the year ahead? Some of you might consider that you're sitting in a very resilient position, others a little bit less so, with somewhat resilient as a key choice. Some on the fence, neither resilient nor vulnerable. Others might be feeling that they're a bit vulnerable or quite vulnerable, and some might have some real difficulty in answering that question. There are so many unknowns that are circling around us at the moment. As we give our colleagues a moment to think about this and answer the question, I wanted to remind us all that we had a very interesting keynote yesterday morning to kick us off, in which Bert van der Swan, the former rector magnificus of Utrecht University, talked us through a series of crises that we are facing simultaneously and yet over a timeline. An initial pandemic crisis, a potentially midterm powerful economic crisis, and a longer term scenario of climate crisis that we're all dealing with. So a lot of different issues, I think, for us to be thinking about at the same time. I wonder if we can now get a sense of what our colleagues are thinking here about their own institution's resilience. Dr. Ignatieff, I wonder what you make of some of the findings that you see on the screen here. Does anything catch your attention?
Well, I'm struck by everybody's honesty, because I marked very resilient on my vote, and I'm now thinking I was less honest than some of the other folks. I would say that, wouldn't I? I'm supposed to be the boss around here. And I think that's an issue. It raises an issue about one's perception of institutional resilience, and the realities may not actually correspond very well. So I learned quite a lot from the honesty of the replies.
That is fantastic.
I think the truth is we all feel we're somewhat resilient, but the whole point about resilience is you get, as we say in the United States, blindsided. You can prepare and prepare and prepare, and then suddenly you're in a COVID-19 lockdown with 24 hours notice. And I think many of us have been through that in the last little while. Some of us thought, boy, we came through that pretty well. And for some of us, it was really a shock.
Absolutely. And as you say, depending on where you sit in the institution, there can be some different perspectives, I would imagine, on this question of resilience. I wonder now if we could pivot to your personal opinion about the European higher education landscape, writ large. How resilient do you feel European higher education institutions are and can be over the next year, particularly in terms of internationalization and global engagement?
Well, I think, first of all, European institutions are often public, are not as dependent on some of the factors, some of the private financing factors that are causing, panic and alarm in a lot of American liberal arts colleges. So I think financial resilience ought to be there, but again, we're going into some very, very tough government budgets where it may be very easy and tempting for governments to cut back on higher education. And so there's a test to the financial resilience of institutions. I think we're not out of the pandemic at all. Like many of you, we're planning to open in Vienna in late September on site. We've got 800 wonderful students coming from 80 countries, but honest to God, I don't know whether they're going to get there. I don't know whether they're going to be able to fly. I don't know whether they're going to be able to get the visa documents they need from governments that are shut down. I don't know whether those visa documents will be accepted by the Austrians. The Austrians have been great with us, but there's just a tremendous amount of uncertainty. And I think in international education, visa is the new choke point for all of us and a tremendous source of uncertainty. And we have good relations with governments. Governments don't need a lecture about how great international education is for the economies of these societies, but national security trumps and public health trumps. And if they want to reassure their publics, they may simply decide we don't want any foreign students. So that's resilience in this case simply means deciding, as I think many of you have done and we've done, which is we will start on site. Damn it, we're going to be open for business on the 28th of September, the year of our Lord, in Vienna. The doors will be open, the sanitary protocols will be ready, and if you can't show up, we will offer the same course online. And so if you're in Bangladesh and you can't get out, we'll offer a course for you. If there are only 2 or 3 students, damn it, we'll do it. I mean, we have to keep faith with internationalization. We have to keep faith with students who have decided to put their faith in us. So my faculty has responded well to it, but it's a strain on the faculty. They may have to teach the same thing twice. But I think the internationalization, the globalization of higher education has been one of the most extraordinary achievements of my lifetime. I remember being an undergraduate at the University of Toronto, which is a very cosmopolitan city in the 1960s, and everybody looked like me. Flash forward to 2020, my campus has people of every race, creed, color, and national origin, and that's one of the glories of this. And I'm sure many of you in your institutions feel the same thing, a kind of passionate attachment to what that's done for us, how it's changed and improved us. But it is on the line at the moment because of visa restrictions, because of fear, and because of pandemic. And we have to stand up and defend and fight for international education more strongly than ever before.
You've mentioned this response to students who cannot travel, offering online education as an option. A question has come into our chat box, or sorry, our Q&A box, asking whether or not your institution specifically will offer either physical or online education or both. And if so, how is your faculty reacting to that call to be that flexible?
Well, you know what faculty are like. They're always complaining. They're always, but they're great. And frankly, we don't have any choice. This is existential. A university like ours that doesn't serve an international student body will go out of business. They know what the deal is. They have to step up, and they may have to do some more teaching. We're a research-intensive university, proud of our international reputation. I don't want to have people teaching 16, 20 credits. I want to keep the credit load at 12, which is what we have. So we have to push and stretch that way. I don't want to do it by hiring a lot of additional adjuncts because I want to maintain teaching quality. I want to give all our faculty extra seminars and extra preparation in online instruction. We made the flip from on-site to online overnight, but everybody knows we did it, but the quality of instruction when you flip like that isn't terrific. So we want to, over the summer, get people ready to really do exciting online. There are a lot of technical problems of which I'm sure you're aware, which is, can you do synchronous, on-site and online at the same time? Do the people online suffer relative to those who are on site? Managing discussions that are both on site and online is extremely demanding pedagogically. Then there are problems specific to international education, which is asynchronicity. That is, it's 9 o'clock in Bangladesh or in the Philippines. We have students from these places. We want them to tune in, but it'll be 2 in the morning or 4 in the. So there are all kinds of problems. We're all struggling with them. But I just think we have to, the key thing to remember is that it's the students that count. I mean, we'll be out of business unless we bust a gut to do everything we can to serve these wonderful students. And I think if we do that, we will preserve international education. If we don't, we will go back to a world we don't want, which is a world of higher education, which is bordered by frontiers and exclusions and shutdowns. And we've all benefited as researchers, as teachers from internationalization, and now we really have to fight for it.
This resonates with things that have come up in a number of our sessions over the last 24 hours as we've been involved in this summit. We have a question in the Q&A box that I think is quite interesting. This notion of what might CEU be thinking about in terms of reimagining or re-innovating when it comes to internationalization? Are there things that you might do differently now in light of the current circumstances, or that you might think differently about doing as you move toward the future? Or do you feel like you're kind of working with some really good fundamental principles and ways of engaging with internationalization that really should be hung on to and pushed forward into the future?
Well, I want to hang on to the diversity of our student body. I want to hang on for moral reasons, for political reasons, to our diversity of our faculty. Let me be frank with you. One of the challenges of international education is we've expanded the cosmopolitan diversity of our student body much more than our faculty. And we have not internationalized either our faculty or our curriculum as much as we need to. I mean, my university, which I'm proud of and think does a good job, is teaching basically North Atlantic social science to people from Africa and Asia who are raised in very different cultures. And it is an increasingly pressing question whether our syllabus is relevant to the learned experience of these students. I mean, I want them to learn Weber and Freud and Mill and Marx and advanced quantitative methods in social science, but I also want us to be able to speak about the particular problems and circumstances of Bangladesh, Zimbabwe, South Africa, these countries. And that's a challenge that I'm not confident that we've solved, but I think it'd be good for us if we can solve it. So that's a key thing, getting the globalization of our student body, the globalization of our faculty, and the globalization of our curriculum all linked up. Big challenge.
Big challenge indeed. We've spoken a lot about faculty, teaching, students, the student experience. I wonder if there are some insights you might be able to share with respect to the resilience of research and the research community at this particular moment. There have been some interesting items in the press, in the higher education press in particular, about this enormous push for international engagement in the search for a vaccine. And that this is potentially kind of opening a door on a very special moment for international collaboration and research. Do you have some thoughts about how things are developing in that area?
Well, I don't, I'm a graduate school in the social sciences and humanities. I don't have a medical school, maybe some of you do, and I don't have any wet science, so we're not in the vaccine business. The issue that's posed for us is whether social science and the humanities can contribute to understanding the enormous impact of, say, COVID-19 on social structure, the ways in which it's laid bare inequalities, the ways in which the impact of the virus has been so differential, hitting poor, Black, Hispanic, marginal populations much harder. All the thing in social science called the social determinants of health are as urgent as ever, and need new emphasis. But I would also say something that goes against the flow. Um, I don't want European universities to drop all the other valuable research they do and go hidebound racing after COVID-19 funds. I think that's disagreeable, and I think will produce crowding effects that won't yield good results. The other thing I think is very important in European education is the Schengen basically collapsed during COVID. The barriers and walls went up across Europe. Um, I think, and I've noticed we're part of a thing called Civica, which is international consortium led by Sciences Po, Bocconi, EUI Florence, LSE. Yes, LSE is still in Europe. The tremendous importance of strengthening these networks. I think the COVID-19 crisis has led all of us who lead these institutions to think we need friends, we need networks, we need to strengthen the research networks in these institutions as fast as we can, because we don't have the firepower alone to deal with these massive societal problems like what COVID-19 has revealed. So we need network aggregation.
Very interesting. And networking definitely came up in the keynote address I mentioned from Bert van der Swan. The idea that really is a very interesting and important way forward for universities in the current crisis, to really think carefully about the possibilities of networking and to really toggle smartly between global networking, global engagement, and local and regional possibilities in terms of networking. That networking a little closer to home might be something that becomes important and relevant at this particular time.
Sure. And on just riffing off that,
yeah.
Universities have an enormously important role locally in communities. We need to be out there being good citizens. We need to be out there helping the food banks, helping people. We need to be doing local research. We need to be linked up with cities trying to manage these things. We need to be, and it's raw politics, some of this. We are institutions dependent on public support. If the public thinks these are ivory towers that are just sitting there watching the rest of their societies burn, citizens will turn their backs on us, and the financial consequences, the recruitment consequences will be dramatic. We're in the business of constantly persuading many people who've not had post-secondary education that these institutions are central to the health, decency, and economic growth of their societies. And that's an unending battle that we must never take for granted.
We have an interesting question here in the Q&A about your opinion regarding cross-disciplinary approaches and the collaboration of technical and social sciences and humanities. Would this also be a possible enrichment and special form of internationalization of the curriculum, moving across boundaries in that sense?
Oh yeah, this is where I suddenly feel my age. I am raised in the North Atlantic classical tradition of the great humanities disciplines, social science disciplines, but I'm aware, as I've had the honor to be in this place, of the explosion in quantitative social science, network social science, quantitative social psychology. All of these disciplines are so important that traditional divides between humanities and the quantitative end of the social science discipline is a disaster. I mean, I think that humanities still has the capacity to reach into our great Western classical traditions and the non-Western traditions and pull out the questions and make them more precise. But boy, these new disciplines in the quantitative social science have the capacity to generate answers that take us so far beyond wishful thinking, impressionism, and kind of guessing that part of the leadership function of academia at the moment is to fight this separation between humanities and social sciences and get the quants talking to the qualitative folks, because this is where great stuff begins to happen.
You referred to a generational issue. In your own experience at your own institution, are you finding that earlier career academics see those connections a little more easily and readily, or is that not necessarily the
Oh, I'm
case?
sure they do, absolutely. And that's why hiring is so important at a university. You've got to get these young. We've been lucky enough to make some great hires this year, and nothing has made me more cheerful about the future of university life than seeing 26, 27, 28, 30-year-olds, many of very diverse backgrounds, but with extraordinary quantitative skills that I just don't have. So all I can do is bow respectfully and say, come on in,
Get out of
join
the
the
way.
party, join the party.
Yeah, oh, that's very exciting. Getting a little bit back to this networking subject that we were on briefly, we have a question regarding the feasibility of truly European universities, ones that are detached from national jurisdictions, or even possibly global institutions that sort of fit that profile. What's your view on the feasibility of such entities?
Oh boy. Well, Civica, this network that has been funded by the European Union, has the ambition of creating a European University of the Social Sciences, in which there'd be a kind of passport, and a student would start in Bocconi in Milan and finish up with us in Vienna, or one of our great women from Africa would start with us and do a year and then finish off at Sciences Po, and we'd have common curriculum formulation and all that stuff. And I think that's promising, although the institutional design of this is fiendishly complicated, and I don't think it's going to happen, tomorrow. I think it's going to take 10 years and lots of foresight, but I think it's exciting. But it also depends on the survival of the European project. You're not going to have a European University of the Social Sciences if Schengen doesn't survive, frankly, because if you reimpose borders, and that's the epidemic is making that a recurrent possibility. It may just shatter the dream of a European university. I also think that while I'm in favor of these collaborations and strongly support them, CEU has a particular history. It's Central and Eastern Europe. We have a vocation in this part. Sciences Po doesn't, has some wonderful scientists and scholars at Sciences Po whom I love and collaborate and learn from. But, Sciences Po's in Paris, for God's sake. So we want to work with them, but I would want to respect the specificity of Sciences Po and the French classical social science tradition. They need to respect the classical Central and Eastern European traditions. And I don't want a Europe that blurs that. That's what makes this an exciting place to work. And there is such a thing as too much intellectual cosmopolitanism, i.e. a cosmopolitanism that loses touch with the roots that make people passionate and knowledgeable about the place they come from.
So that actually does feed into a question that has now appeared in the Q&A queue around Indigenous knowledge and presenting a curriculum that really spans the gamut there, from the Indigenous and highly localized to these global learning outcomes that we're hoping students have. How are institutions like CEU trying to manage that complexity and that really wide continuum of knowledge and understanding?
Well, I think honestly, we're not doing as good a job as we could. We're proud of one thing we've been doing for 25 years, which is Roma education. We were pioneers in Roma education, but that's not Indigenous. It tries to be respectful and curious and knowledgeable about Roma Indigenous traditions, which are deep and rich in music and culture and art. But in some ways, what our teaching is let's teach Roma to get into graduate institutions in Europe. It's a very different operation than just curating Indigenous knowledge. And because I'm a Canadian, I also know something about the other meanings of Indigenous, and the university traditions in North America have often been very, very slow to understand the richness and depth of Aboriginal Indigenous traditions. So we've got a battle there, and it's an ongoing battle, and some of the COVID-19 stuff has exposed just how condescending, mainstream academia has been to indigenous knowledge and indigenous traditions. And one of the functions of a university is to validate, to legitimize, to say, pay attention. This counts. This stuff is for real. This is wisdom and knowledge you ignore at your peril. Universities should do more of that in relation specifically to indigenous knowledge, whether it's Aboriginal, whether it's indigenous to class, to region, to gender, to locale. I mean, all of that's very important.
So there are really enormous challenges, complexities, opportunities, that are baked into the current situation that we're living. And we've been talking about them largely through the lens of institutions, kind of at that level. But resilience is also something that can be discussed at a bit more of a personal level. And I was wondering if we could reflect in our final minutes here with you on some of the thinking that you've been doing about what individuals can be doing to take care of themselves, to take care of their colleagues, their students, being members of their communities in positive ways in the light of these very real challenges around us.
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. Universities are not machines. They're not families either, but they are communities. And I've noticed when we're online for 3 months and don't actually see each other physically. I've been online since March the 12th continuously. This is how I relate to the world. The only person I ever see is my wife, and that's not good. I mean, I look at my colleagues. So we have a small leadership team of 6, and I kind of look at the pictures. How are you doing? You look a little tired. And it's very hard to maintain the kind of mutual care that ought to go into communities and leadership teams. And I'm sure you may feel the same thing watching this. I don't think we grasp how tired we are. I don't think we grasp how stressed we are from this. I mean, don't cry for me, Argentina. I mean, we're doing fine. I got no complaints. I love my job. But I think the distantiation, the virtualization of our relationships is not necessarily good for the kind of care that you're talking about.
Are there any things that you're doing within your team or are asking be implemented kind of down the line, the hierarchy at CEU, to help your staff manage this distance and manage the self-care and the need to be in the situation potentially for some time?
All I can say is communicate. I mean, I wouldn't say we've done a fabulous job. We've tried. God knows we have community meetings. We're a small institution, and some of you run or part of huge institutions where, having everybody on a chat isn't possible. We can get a couple of hundred at a time on our sessions. I've got one scheduled for next Tuesday. So all I can do is communicate, and communicate not just to leadership team, not just to senior faculty, but crucially to staff. And some of the staff have had to be very heroic. I had 400 students from 80 countries in a residence center in Budapest in the middle of the pandemic. And the question was, would our Hungarian language staff show up every day to feed them and keep the place safe and clean? They did, all 15 of them. So I feel very strongly about them. They're heroes of the story. So you want to acknowledge heroes, no question.
And I have to say, from some of the other sessions that we've been having, numerous individuals have pointed to the very key role that their institutional leaders have played in setting this kind of tone and in communicating that sort of care, even though it can be difficult to really do anything about it, other than letting people know that you're really feeling what they're going through and appreciating their contributions. Well, Dr. Ignatieff, I have to say we have appreciated your contribution immensely today. Thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to be with us.
Thank you to everybody. I'm sorry couldn't we answer more questions. I hope you have a great session. Nice to talk.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Look forward to connecting again soon. Bye-bye. So this session, although a portion of it is behind us, is definitely not over. We are now moving into a different phase of our experience together, which involves having you move into small breakout groups. As you'll see on the screen here, there are some guiding questions that we'd like for you to think about addressing in your breakout groups. Before you head off to those groups, it might be helpful for you to take a screenshot or maybe even a photo with your camera. We will be feeding these questions to you in the groups, but in case there are any technical glitches, we would not want you to be without them, so you might want to take a quick moment to do that. They would include how you're relating to some of the things that Professor Ignatieff has mentioned, what your institution has learned about its staff and students in this period, and if there are any new practices that have been put into place to maintain resilience for the coming year. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed your experience in the breakout discussion rooms and in the Padlet exercise. It certainly has been fascinating on the backside to be watching all of the developments that are occurring on the Padlet website. I have two very nice announcements to make at this point, one of which has to do with the Padlets themselves. This is that we will be leaving all of the Padlets that we've been working with over the last 2 days. They'll be open for about 24 hours. We're very much interested in giving everybody access to those for a little bit longer. We know these exercises are quick and fast moving, so that you can dip into them, review a bit more, potentially add some additional thoughts that occur to you with a little clarity overnight. You should be able to see in the chat box the links to the 3 previous Padlets, and of course you have access to the current Padlet. So we hope that's useful for you, and of course information from the Padlets will be provided when we follow up after the summit in order to send along information about the recordings, etc. My second happy announcement is that in this final session this afternoon, I am joined by EAIE's president, Sabine Pendle. Really delighted to have you with us, Sabine, for some final thoughts as we collect ourselves after 2 very full days and certainly a very full hour and a half here on the subject of resilience. You've had an opportunity to be thinking about this for some time, of course, but also looking at the Padlet that we've all seen develop so quickly just now. And I wonder if there's some particular thoughts and ideas that occur to you as you look across this information that we've seen generated.
Yes, Laura. First of all, the Padlet was really overwhelming, right? With all these suggestions and ideas coming in, I felt really inspired. The 2 areas I would like to briefly pick out are, it was mentioned, the uncertainty of students. And I think it was the uncertainty of students, but also for staff. And when the lockdown actually happened, the students relied so much on the administrative staff. And even there, they didn't have any answers. So communication was very important there, but sometimes the answers were not able to be fixed. And Michael Ignatieff earlier even said, with all the travel restrictions, it didn't make our life easier. So everybody's pretending the second wave. So now we are trying to prepare. Whether we will be successful, we'll see, but at least we know approximately what might happen. So this was the first thing, the uncertainty of students. And then what I thought was very important was the working from home. Yes, all of us, we were working from home. And it has a lot to do with trust. I like the word mentioned in the Padlet. It has to do with trust. All our bosses had to trust us that we actually work, and we did, and we managed. Yeah, it was a big surprise. Yes, we can. Yeah, like Bob the Builder. Yes, we can, but I'm sure that this is not a total replacement in the future. In the future, there might be ways to combine this, although I feel that it might be even more stressful, because for many items, you need to have the physical interaction, well, to meet people, yeah? Because what I personally felt is the creativity and the inspiration, I was missing that, yeah? It was a lot of one-way or two-way communication, but there's much more going on in a team. So I think that it might be more stressful, and we have to find a way to work with when people are then in the office. To have one meeting after the other can be very tiring as well. So these were my two areas. What were you thinking about looking at the
So
Padlet?
I was very struck by some of the things that were coming across the digital, the online life and the digital tools section, and how there was an individual who mentioned that, you know, digital tools were forced on us, but it actually has turned out to be a positive thing because we were really made to dip into those areas, learn some new skills, learn new ways of doing things, and that from that, we've been talking a lot about online education, so the educational side of things, but there have also been efficiencies gained in administration now with embracing these digital activities and digital platforms in that area as well, and a lot of inspiration on that front. I was also struck by some of the comments that were in the society section, this sense of kind of the two sides of a coin. On the one hand, the very positive and warm developments, a sense of solidarity and that we're in this together. But on the other hand, a realization that there's real insecurity and vulnerability out there, and that those are important emotions to also understand and embrace, and that there is an unevenness in our own personal resilience at times when we're facing some of those challenges. So I thought that was rather interesting. Great. So one of the things that I wanted to refer back to that came up not only on the Padlet, but we didn't have a chance to address in the Q&A with Michael was something that had to do with internationalization at home. That's certainly been an area of great importance in European higher education. And I was kind of curious for your take on the extent to which you think internationalization at home has a really key role to play in the future of resilience of internationalization in general. Do you think this is a really rather important moment for internationalization at home because mobility has been so upended as we've known it?
Yes, but the importance of internationalization at home is that it's not very strongly connected to mobility. So when we talk about the content of internationalization at home, this is the time to find a good methodology, to transport the content of internationalization, whether that you have students sitting in the classroom or whether they are online. So like we learned yesterday, it's not the technology that should prevent us from spreading the good news, but we have to find a methodology to transport that. But
Absolutely.
Yes, there's never been a better time.
Really very exciting to think of some of the possibilities in the face of many challenges. So we've covered quite a bit of ground over the last 2 days, and all of it has been tied to this theme of the year ahead. As we look at the last couple of moments that we have here together, I think we would all be really interested, Sabine, in having a message from EAE's president about the perceptions of the year ahead. What is on your mind when you think about the coming year and the EAE's role in that environment?
First of all, I still have to start breathing because these were 2 very intensive days. When yesterday morning we got together, more or less, our backpacks were full with questions and problems, challenges. And now I feel that my backpack is full again, but with ideas, with solutions, with suggestions. And all of this is helpful to cope with this new normal. Because what we learned from yesterday morning, from the keynote of Bert van der Zwaan, is we will never get our old lives back. This is now our reality. There are different crises, as he mentioned, that will be with us for the next couple of years. But the challenges will also bring up new opportunities. And today, when Michael Ignatieff very optimistically, basically, transported the message of the chances we have ahead. So this was very inspiring for me as well. But you were right that with the EIE, we are working very hard at the moment, as we all can see right now. First of all, there is a newly elected leadership team, right? They are all desperately waiting to become active, for example. Then we have a new strategy based on our famous diamond strategy, which will go online in September. And then in October, we're all aware of a special event. And please, everybody, watch out. There is something really great coming up to you in October. So yes, but looking ahead and also looking in the past, what also Michael mentioned today, it's all about friends, it's all about networks, and with this EAE community, we all know is we can help each other out with events like this. We are in this together, but we can navigate the future successfully. And this is, I think, very positively, I think. And to end up also with very positively, maybe some thanks I would like to add, to be faster than you. I would like, first of all, to thank all the fantastic speakers that we had for the last 2 days. I would like to also thank a great team at the office of the EIE who made this possible. Very professional, very popular, so I really like that. I would like to thank, of course, the audience who stayed with us for this full amount of time. And my very special thank goes to a fantastic moderator, which is you, Laura Rumbley. So fantastic job. So for me, all there is left is to wish all a great summer. All the best, stay healthy, and goodbye.
Brilliant. Thank you so very much, Sabine. You've taken many words out of my mouth, and that's a great thing. All of those thanks I second very wholeheartedly. To all our participants, we appreciate your being with us today, and we really hope you've enjoyed this summit as much as we have enjoyed designing it and delivering it and walking this road with you. Your opinion matters to us, so before you leave today, we would be very grateful if you would take a moment to fill out a quick satisfaction survey to let us know how we have done. Any additional comments that you'd like to leave for us in the chat box would also be very, very welcome. We'll leave that chat box open for a couple of minutes so you can be in touch with us, be in touch with one another, and say your final goodbyes. We certainly look forward to seeing you again at another EA gathering. And as Sabine has mentioned in particular, please stay tuned for information about our plans for a very special online event in October of this year.